Greetings, everyone. Good morning. How is everyone today? I hope you're all doing most well. I've been having some thoughts about the MK Ultra program and haven't been able to maybe find any places that have addressed this issue. Maybe I'm just not looking in the right places. So if anyone can help, that would be great too. But I sometimes get the feeling that there are definitely rival factions within MK Ultra, which, once again, we've kind of found and there were a lot of different MK projects, a lot of different MK Ultra projects, and I've had some of the papers around before, and right now I'm sort of in the woods, but it's interesting to see that it sort of started out in universities. I remember there was something called MK Project Blue at the University of Minnesota, and Ron Patton talks about that in another video where I interview him, but I remember reading that, and a lot of places where people are what we would call marginalized. I remember Boys Home in New Jersey, there were just tons of places, but a lot of that sort of type of place, universities or detention homes, and just other types of places as well. But people get moved around, they get shuffled about. Different people have different philosophies. I always got the feeling when I met Terence McKenna, and I guess we can get into that. How on earth did I meet Terence McKenna? And that was that. It's funny because I lived like practically next door to him in Hawaii for a long time, and I would sort of have nothing to do with that ilk, as it were. And yet it came clear to me over time that I did want to meet him, and I was in New York the summer of 99, actually, which is kind of wild. It's just like that song, right? And so, anyway, at that time, I was staying in the East Village, across the street from the St. Mark's 80 Theater, and just staying with an old roommate, a friend, a director who now after 9/11 fled to Puerto Rico. Now he has another little disaster, the poor thing. And so we were just kind of out and about one night. I think he was trying to go to this club called Idlewild that looked like the Idlewild Airport from a long time ago, like the 50s or something, but it was like in a warehouse in sort of the mid part of the village, or maybe even more by the Bowery. And as we were walking, the phone rang and Christian called, and Christian's like a whole other thing unto itself, but Christian called and said, "Terence McKenna's in town. He's speaking at the Wetlands tonight." And the Wetlands is sort of a watering hole bar, once again in that lower Manhattan area. And I was not a big frequenter of these types of places, and I don't think Tom was really either. The Wetlands sort of theme was that it was like the cool activist bar, and it had like a big microbus inside, and downstairs was kind of nice because it sort of almost was like a pyramid going down, with the carpeted stairs being really like the seats for the audience. And it was weird. I mean, he was literally like on stage practically as we got there, and everything got weird. We saw Richard Metzger, and then we saw Terence, and we were so sort of taken with him, and we found out that he was going to the Omega Institute for kind of a longer session, and so we decided, yeah, we will go to the Omega Institute. And we hopped on a train and went up to the Omega Institute, and we, just, went up there in the middle of the night. It was wild, and got a room, and we were just up there. And then Terrence was there too. The next morning we went, and they were sitting in a big circle. There were maybe about 100 people. So it was, sort of big, sort of small. And interestingly, we ended up going to his room, and he said, "We have ways of making you creative," he said, when I told him I worked at the Waldorf School. So he had a nice little sense of humor, was really lovely. And, he was suffering from headaches, and, lo and behold, he did succumb to something in the brain. But I always kind of got this weird feeling he had somehow wound up in the CIA. I think it's because when you look at his history, like, who else is in East Timor, right? In 72, butterfly hunting, and that's always kind of the perfect CIA cover. They say that the number one is anything to do with wildlife or birds, right? Because you can just be anywhere where you just spotted something rare. And the second being ministers, because people tend to just look at clergy and become slightly disarmed, even if they're non-religious themselves. You see people sort of smile at nuns and things. I don't know, maybe in this climate people scowl. I don't know what they say right now. Who knows? But just sort of traditionally speaking, for cover, that those are two big ones. But there is this feeling that there is a lot of infighting and shuffling around. And I just always wondered, what happens if someone is programmed by one set? What happens if someone is programmed, wow, there's a little ground. Oh, is it like those little ground birds? I forget what they're called. That sort of sleep on the ground and hop about. They're in this little grotto. So we are, and then what if they move out of a sort of jurisdiction or into another network by somehow accident? Because no matter how much things are planned, it does appear that there are accidents that occur, and that there are bait and switches that happen. And I think that there are also rises and falls in the value of the MK person, that, they could mess up. They could really mess up bad and go to the bottom of the list. But then maybe everyone at the top of the list suddenly is killed off, or they messed up even worse. And so suddenly bottom of the list can bump back up to the top. And they might have gained knowledge during the time they were at the bottom that makes them of even more value. So it's very interesting, but I do feel that there are definitely rival, I was going to say gangs, but I believe it's agencies is, the term I'm supposed to use, that there are rival agencies and agents, and that there are some who are almost, angelic, and we're to protect people because they do know that there are others who are out to torture them. And there are some really value in being around water I do have people, once again, this is a lot for people who've watched the Alyssa videos and more of the MK Ultra ones, that being around water is really nice. That could just be nice for anyone on a nice day. But, are there rival agencies? Am I just being silly? I always see everything being like, okay, they program you, and then you get programmed, and then they do this. And I'm sure that's all well and good, but it feels like things get messy. It feels like, there's someone who wants to take control and take things just a little bit further, and, someone else that's going, no, no, no. And not made, and with ethical sort of, different ethical maybe wars and experimental wars, because I'm not saying that people there really have ethics, that that's too much of a problem. Although I think every now and then that different people do have their limits. Maybe, I don't know. I'm pretty cynical, and maybe Terrence was, maybe there's blackmail used, maybe there's different things used for people like him, maybe, maybe the CIA likes to keep people who are intelligent kind of close, but, highly controlled, highly watched. These are all just, I'm not throwing out that I am throwing out that MK Ultra is real, that we do know that has occurred, and that we have the fusion place up in Seattle, and different things that are good to be aware, just to be aware of. There's no reason to hide one's head in the proverbial sand, just because it's something of that nature, which is MK Ultra. And there might even be more subtle ways, of course. Television, school, all of these things that are sort of hashed. But I'm really talking about agencies and different wars over what is the person's usefulness, I would assume, more than anything, even above, ethics. Like, you can't do that to Johnny. I mean, we're way beyond that at this point when we're dealing with these people. But they definitely must have some sort of different ideas about what is the best use. And I do feel strongly there are rival agencies, and I know it's an odd thing to sort of discuss, but I did feel when I was at working at Sullivan and Cromwell, protected from certain other elements that had been around me. And I suddenly wondered, wow, am I on some other kind of turf in my little world? Why did everything somehow change? It's a pretty interesting time and interesting place, Sullivan. But it's not really a place to be discussed at this point in time, and not really too much with. Well, it's funny. I was going to say not too much with MK Ultra, and then just remembered, who ran the showboat there, and we had the Dulles brothers. And if I'm talking to a sort of younger crowd that goes, Dulles, what's Dulles? Maybe you've heard of Dulles Airport in Washington, D.C., and that is the Dulles Airport. And one of the Dulles brothers, we had John Foster and Allen. One was the Secretary of State under Eisenhower, and the other one was a partner at Sullivan and Cromwell, which was like this amazingly intense law firm. I have gotten some different things about Roy Cohn lately. I don't know if he's like coming up in the news, and I don't know a ton about him, but I mean, I know a little bit, but he was in that mix. I'm just not kind of sure. Sort of, I've heard so much kind of weird conflicting data on Roy Cohn. But Sullivan was where a lot of kind of strange things went down historically. You know, I'm not here to sort of spill the beans about like what I worked on today or anything like that, but you can look it up yourself and you can see, you know, who the players were and who the clients have been. There's a book that a lot of people like called The Belarus Project, and it's funny because I read part of that book and I looked in the index and everything, and it was kept saying it was all coming from a Wall Street law firm. It was all coming from a Wall Street law firm. And, you know, the name of it, you know, it would be nice if they would have put the name of it in the book, was Sullivan and Cromwell. And they still exist, and they have different little branches everywhere. And I was just a minion there. I was a proof reader, right? I was just a little corporate legal proofreader, kind of just an odd little strange thing to do in New York, just kind of peeking into the abyss, as it were, just taking a good long drink, a long luxurious drink of what exactly was going down, as much as I could gather. But I didn't read about any aliens, so there you guys. Sorry. Take good care. Bye.